You bring them here. You own every kill they ruin. 5 clans had gathered at the bottleneck, a corridor of rock and ridge carved by 10,000 years of animal movement through the same narrow pass. Dozens of hunters. Fire on both flanks. Spears at the end. The kind of convergence that happened only once every several years, where a coordinated effort could bring down prey no single group could take alone. But one clan arrived with something none of the others had ever seen at a hunt. 3 wolves, walking in loose formation alongside their marching column. It had been 5 years since the first pup came back from the hills in a hide sling. 5 years of failure and adjustment, of wolves that bolted during hunts and had to be retrieved, of clan members bitten, of animals that never accepted the camp, of cold nights spent wondering whether any of it was worth the trouble, of the original hunter watching animals that seemed to have chosen him specifically, wondering sometimes if what he had started could be passed on at all, or whether it lived and died with him. But the hunters who stayed with it, who kept observing rather than commanding, had learned something difficult to explain to anyone who hadn't seen it themselves. A wolf and a human, working from the same ground, were not the same as 2 humans or 2 wolves. They were something that had not existed before. 3 wolves now ran with the clan on hunts, not as tools, not as pets, as something between those things, and nothing else. The broad-shouldered Eastern clan leader, a man whose people had lost kills to wolf packs every winter for a decade, had stepped directly into the path of the arriving column. His terms were simple: bring the wolves, own every kill they ruin. Other voices joined before the hunter's clan leader could answer. Wolves ruin traps, scatter herds, steal kills. You do not bring predators to a shared hunt. The clan leader held his ground. The wolves stay. He said quietly that his wolves would save more kills than any man present. The Eastern leader studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Not from belief, from the temporary math of needing bodies for a mammoth hunt. The wolves were allowed, but the other hunters made clear, if anything went wrong, the responsibility was owed. The target was a bull mammoth, an old male, separated from his herd, tracked to a natural bottleneck between 2 ridges. The plan was straightforward: drive him forward through the narrowing terrain until he had nowhere to go. Dozens of hunters from 5 different clans forming the walls of a human corridor, fire on both flanks, spears at the end. The mammoth entered the trap on schedule. For a moment, it seemed like it would work cleanly. The animal moved through the corridor, agitated but contained, the lines holding. Then something shifted in the way he held his head, and the lines did not hold. He turned, not in panic, in decision. He had found a weakness in the human wall on his left flank, a gap where 2 hunters had crowded together instead of spreading apart, and he moved toward it with the deliberate weight of an animal that had survived longer than most. 12 hunters were directly in his path. No room to scatter, no time for commands to reach them across the noise. The wolf handler did not shout. He made a sharp signal, short, percussive, learned through repetition rather than training, and the wolves split instantly from his position. They did not attack the mammoth. That would have been suicide. What they did was harder to describe. They became a second set of walls. 2 wolves went wide to the right, darting at the mammoth's hind legs from his blind spot, not biting but flashing close, forcing his attention. Every time the animal tried to commit to his turn, a wolf came in from the opposite direction, close enough to snap, fast enough to force a pivot. The mammoth turned again. Then his great head swept low and fast, and the younger wolf was not quite clear. The tusk caught it across the shoulder, and sent it tumbling hard through the snow. It lay still. The handler's breath stopped. Everything they had built ran on 3 animals working together. With one down, the flanks would open, and the mammoth would find the gap. Then the wolf got up. It shook snow from its face, found its footing, and came back in. Not from the angle the handler had trained it to cover, but from its own reading of the mammoth's movement, filling the space on instinct alone. Nobody had taught it that. Nobody could have. The charge kept breaking before it could build. The 12 hunters in the path had time to scramble clear. The mammoth turned and turned again, found himself facing the spear line. The kill was made. Nobody celebrated immediately. The hunters from the other clans stood where they were and looked at the wolves, who had already pulled back to the edge of the kill site. The animals were muddy and breathing hard. The younger wolf moved with a slight stiffness in its shoulder, but did not lie down. They sat and waited with the patience of creatures that understood perfectly well how this part worked. The silence went on longer than it should have. The handler looked at his wolves. He thought about 5 years, about the months before the first one would take meat from his hand, about the animals that never accepted camp and the ones that did, and everything he had learned about the difference between containing something and earning its trust. He had started with a question that belonged to him. Standing here, he understood it no longer did. 50 men had just done the same calculation in the space of 1 minute. The question belonged to all of them now. He was not sure whether that felt like success. Then the Eastern leader, the man who had stepped into the column's path at arrival, walked across the kill site. He looked at the wolves. He looked at the handler. He didn't offer thanks. He offered a trade. He pointed to the younger wolf, still moving with a slight hitch, still sitting at its post, and asked what it would cost. Flints, furs, labor, whatever was wanted. The handler looked at his clan leader. The clan leader said nothing for a moment. Then he said no. The refusal was not an insult. It was something harder to answer. Every hunter present had watched what happened. Not all of them had understood it in the moment. The chaos was too fast, too loud. But they understood it now, standing over the kill, watching the wolves claim their portion with the quiet expectation of animals who had earned it. A tribe with wolves hunts differently. They find what humans cannot find. They hold what humans cannot hold. They cover the angles that spears and fire cannot cover. They ask for nothing except to be fed and to be allowed to do what they already want to do. The Eastern leader stood apart from the others and watched the younger wolf work the meat. He said nothing for a long time. Then, to no one in particular, "How young do they need to be?" The handler understood the question without needing to hear the rest of it. If one tribe has wolves and another doesn't, the gap between them will only grow. By the time the meat was divided and the fires built for the night, the question had spread through every group present. Not out loud, not as a declaration, but as a thought that had taken root and would not leave. Where are the nearest dens? That was how it spread. Not through teaching, not through trade or treaty, through envy. By the following spring, hunters across the region would be searching the hills with new purpose. And in the years after that, in ways that no single person planned or foresaw, the world would begin, quietly, irreversibly, to change.